Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of Second Take Cinema, coming at you from the Impala Films headquarters in sunny Southend-on-Sea. As always, I'm your host, Jamie Evans, and I'm joined, as always, by Rory Jocelyn.
Hello, everybody.
Today, we are doing something a little bit different, a little bit out there. I'm indulging myself a little bit, because today, ladies and gentlemen, is the 60th birthday, the 60th anniversary of one of my personal favourite shows of all time, Doctor Who. And the fact that this show has lasted for 60 years is insane. There are very few shows, we've talked about this before, Rory, there's very few shows that can celebrate a 60th anniversary. I'm very excited to see what lies in store for us with the 360th anniversary specials airing this winter, with David Tennant returning as the 14th Doctor, not the 10th, he's playing a different version. Russell T Davies is back, Catherine Tate's back, Neil Patrick Harris is playing a villain in one of the specials.
Do you know he's a villain?
Yeah, he's the Celestial Toy Maker.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely a villain. Rachel Talele's back to direct one of them.
Oh, okay.
They've brought back Murray Gold, who's my favourite composer from Doctor Who.
Right.
He was the composer for Eccleston, Tennant, Smith and Capaldi, and then left at the start of the Chibnall era, and they brought some weird dubstep thing in to try and be more in touch with the youth, and I hated it because I'm an old man. So today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk...
Gala, hey, how you doing?
That'd probably work at a Comic-Con as a pickup line.
Pickup line.
Galilei, how you doing? So today, ladies and gentlemen,
what come inside your TARDIS, baby.
Yeah, it's bigger on the inside.
Those are getting cut, aren't they, Jim?
No, they're not. Let's ruin it. So today, ladies and gentlemen, we're doing a little thing where we're going to go back to the 50th anniversary of Doctor Who, because that's really the closest thing you've got to a modern Doctor Who movie, other than the 1996 television movie that they did, and that's not very good. So we're not going to talk about that.
You got the Peter Cushing ones where he's human.
Yeah, but they're from the 60s. I said modern.
Ah.
Well, I suppose it depends on what time scale you're talking about. If you're talking in the concept of the whole fucking cosmos existing, then Earth itself is still pretty modern. If you're talking about the entire existence of the universe.
I wasn't quite going to that scope, Jamie, but thank you for introducing the possibility.
Well, it's like that famous saying, isn't it? If you were to condense the whole of the whole of Earth's history into 1 year, humanity doesn't turn up till very late on the 24th of December.
Yeah.
In relative terms, that's how long we've been here.
Yep.
Anyway, so we are looking back at the 2013 50th anniversary special. We're talking about the 50th anniversary of Doctor Who, the Day of the Doctor, because it's basically feature length. What's interesting about this is obviously I'm a hardcore Doctor Who fan. I've seen this episode a whole bunch of times. Rory is not a Doctor Who fan. Safe to say your entire experience with Doctor Who is you've seen the Eccleston season and that's it?
I've seen bits of the others. I saw the Matt Smith for most of the first season of Matt Smith.
Okay.
Don't remember much of it. Don't remember much of the Eccleston one either. But yeah, so the only, as we say, there's only one other show really that matches the length of time of Doctor Who, and even then, Doctor Who still has a few years on it, which is Star Trek.
Yeah.
Talk to me about Star Trek, man. I'm all in there, whereas you're not, though I do believe you're catching up with it at the moment with Next Gen. Basically, Doctor Who is my version of your Star Trek. I've got to catch up.
Yeah, except there's much more Star Trek for me to get through first.
Yes.
Well, no. If I was going to make you watch all of classic Who, there wouldn't be. But I'm not going to do that to you.
Right. Okay.
Even though, hands up, some of classic Doctor Who's brilliant.
Well, it wouldn't have stayed as long, I would imagine, if it was all garbage.
No, some of it's very good. You just have to be in a very specific mind frame to watch it.
Right.
Because, much like a lot of original series Star Trek, it's aged. The problem is, original series, I think the benefit you've got with Star Trek...
Star Trek hasn't aged.
I think the benefit, not as badly, I'll give you that, not as badly.
Oh, really?
Because
I was
Star
joking,
Trek,
but...
Star Trek always had a higher budget than Doctor Who, just by virtue of being an American show.
Okay.
And also,
except the third season, maybe.
and because the episodes are tight 40-minute episodes,
Right.
whereas Doctor Who back in its classic era, one story would be like 8 20-minute parts.
Oh, jeez.
So some of them do just feel like they're playing for time in the middle. It's a little bit like the Dragon Ball Z problem we've talked about,
Yeah.
where it's like, okay, the writers haven't had time to write what's happening next yet, so let's just do an episode where it's just the Doctor walking around the TARDIS being like, what's happening here?
Except in Dragon Ball Z, it's just a fight.
Yeah, some of them, though, hold up very surprisingly well.
Yeah.
It's probably a sad thing about the human race that some of the more moral-based episodes
Still land.
are even worse today than they were back then. But I was going to say, the other big difference is with Star Trek and Doctor Who is it's funny is both of them, they kind of did a flip, because Star Trek did 3 seasons and then went away for a long time.
Yes.
Not counting the animated series
Yes.
and the movies, just talking about TV here. So when it comes back with Next Gen, towards the end of the 80s,
for about 20 years.
yeah, you really do feel the improvement in that time.
Yeah, the production values.
And just the way TV is made and stuff. Doctor Who ran from 1963 all the way to 1989 continuously.
Right.
So the progress in techniques feels much slower.
Well, it grades, I'm guessing, over the seasons.
Yeah, but it doesn't grade as quickly as it should because the BBC were ashamed of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And it was always kept as like this little basement show that they did for weird nerds who lived in the basement. And the budgets got smaller and smaller as it went along. They don't improve as quick as they should, and that is partly the writing's fault, to be fair. They shouldn't have been still trying to do... By the time you get to, say, the 7th Doctor in the late 80s, you should not still be using the format you're using in the First Doctor era.
Right.
And that is, I'll hold my hands up, that is a fault of the writing staff on Doctor Who.
They should have done more bottle episodes, you mean?
Yeah, or change the episodes to 40-minuters or something like that.
Right.
You shouldn't still be doing 8 20-minute parts of one story, because even by the 80s, people thought that was slow.
Yeah.
Obviously, then Doctor Who went away for most of the 90s and the early 2000s, which is kind of when Star Trek was in a boom period.
Yeah,
that's when you had Next Gen, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager all ran through that time,
Star
didn't
Trek
they?
ruled the roost. You had Babylon 5 came out during that time.
Yeah.
Babylon 5 is very good.
Stargate was in the 90s, wasn't it?
Late 90s.
There was a big sci-fi
SG-1,
boom in the 90s.
Yeah, and weirdly enough, Doctor Who basically missed almost all of it.
Yeah, and then came back.
Yeah, in the 2000s when the sci-fi thing started being replaced with the superhero.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With some modifications to its formula, but we won't talk about those today.
Sure.
So anyway, a bit of an interesting thing then, because this is kind of just dropping Rory in this. Basically, to sum up
At least I'd seen the 2 main Doctors that come back for this. Obviously, the one who was still current was Matt Smith during this point.
Yeah.
And the recurring one is the David Tennant.
Yeah.
I had seen both of them before.
Yeah.
So I was aware of them. I don't know their histories as well as maybe I should have done for this episode. Obviously, the John Hurt is the third main Doctor in this episode. He's exclusive to this episode, if I'm not...
he has a very brief appearance at the end of the previous one, which is what sets him up.
Right.
But he literally doesn't have... I don't think he has any dialogue. He just turns around and literally a graphic comes up that says, and introducing John Hurt as the Doctor.
Interesting.
And then it cuts to the credits.
Sure. So, other than that introduction... He's exclusive to this episode, so there's no way I would have known about him before. Yeah. In fact, the way they set this up is that not even big Doctor Who fans would have known who the hell he was until they explain his storyline in this episode.
Yeah.
But at least Matt Smith and David Tennant, I was missing some context. And there's a few cameo appearances by people that I was like, who the fuck is that?
Yeah.
Though I did appreciate seeing Rose, even though it's not actually Rose.
Yeah.
Because, again, I'd watched the Christopher Eccleston season, the first season of New Who.
Yeah.
New Who.
That is what they call it, New Who.
And, basically, so I knew who that character was meant to be, but obviously she's not actually playing Rose in this. She's playing a facsimile of Rose created by the Death Box, or whatever it's called.
The Moment.
The Moment.
The Moment.
Magic
So yeah.
moment. onwards.
So just give people some context, so they have some appreciation. This episode came out. You'd had 3 seasons of Matt Smith. This came out in the November that the 7th season had aired during that summer. And season 7 is not a great season of Doctor Who, and Stephen Moffat has since said that is largely because all his attention was on getting the 50th right. He had to try and do it, so they cut the budget at the last minute for what he was supposed to have. Due to some contract issues, they didn't even know if they were going to have either of the Doctors for a long time. They did try to get Eccleston and have Eccleston be the Doctor that fought the Time War.
Yeah,
but
instead of John Hurt.
Yeah, but due to his bad relationship with the BBC now, he refused to come back. So John Hurt was added in as an extra Doctor that they call the War Doctor so that they don't fuck up the numbering.
Yeah.
And they do a whole gimmick where no one's ever mentioned him because basically they've repressed him and they don't admit that he exists, sort of thing. And the other thing to know is that one of the big challenges he was faced with was the BBC insisted, I suppose rightly, that the show had to not only be a monumental episode, not only be a celebration of the history of Doctor Who, but also be accessible to casual viewers. Because I do know, like, my parents, they watched the 50th. They hadn't watched Doctor Who since they were kids. But because shows don't make it to 50th anniversaries, it was a big event on British TV, and it was even shown in some cinemas. One of my biggest regrets is I didn't go and see it in a cinema.
Right.
I kind of wish I had. Because I've seen all the adverts they did leading up to it as well, and the adverts are very funny as well. It's mostly just Smith and Tennant ripping on each other.
Just who it.
Just who it. Oh, my God. But basically,
oh, come on, that would have been an awesome tagline.
Yeah.
No, you're not happy with that tagline.
So, another interesting fact about this, it actually holds a Guinness World Record, this episode.
Okay.
Not for the longevity of the show, but it is the largest ever simulcast TV drama, meaning it was simulcast in a whole bunch of countries.
Oh, you mean broadcasting?
Same...
I thought you meant the amount of cast members.
No. Sorry. So simulcasting is what they call it when, say Doctor Who airs at 7 p.m. on a Saturday here. Mm-hmm. Because they don't want any spoilers to get out.
Oh, they make sure that it broadcasts at the exact same time,
accounting for all the time differences. Okay. And it doesn't give. So it was broadcast simultaneously in 94 different countries.
Wow.
That is pretty... For Doctor Who as well.
Yeah,
like,
I know.
Like, you'd think it'd be like Friends or something. Like, the finale of Friends would be the one that did that or something.
Well, you know what they should have done, being Doctor Who? They should have filmed it.
And gone back in time.
No. Released it somewhere but, like, private on YouTube or something.
Yeah.
Then actually make it publicly viewable. Like 3 years later.
Yeah.
And when people come to look at it, it's like uploaded 3 years ago. It's like, how did we miss this Doctor Who episode? It's like, it was broadcast back in time.
Yeah.
No one would have the balls to do that because they'd be like, we need the returns kind of immediately, guys, not in 3 years' time. But that would be a really funny and awesome way to do a Doctor Who schedule on at least like one special.
So, It had cinema release in Cineworld View and Odeon cinemas. It was also released in cinemas in Canada and New Zealand, and in AMC cinemas in the United States. In Mexico, it was also released in 20 cinemas. So not even just in Britain, it had a cinematic release. In terms of reception, on Rotten Tomatoes, it holds a 100%. On the tomato meter, which I did not know.
That is very unusual for a Rotten Tomatoes. Normally they're very negative.
Yeah. IGN gave it 9.3. New York Magazine gave it 5 stars. Radio Times gave it 5 stars. The AV Club gave it an A-, and Daily Telegraph gave it 5 stars as well. Critical consensus reads, Doctor Who Day of the Doctor is a joyous marker in the series, uniting 2 of the most beloved Time Lords and setting them together on a rousing adventure full of crowd-pleasing nods and winks. winks. Ben Lawrence of the Daily Telegraph gave it 5 stars, calling it charming, eccentric, and very, very British.
It is very British.
Yeah, Den of Geek praised the special, calling it terrific, and stating that it was pulsating with comedy ambition and a top-to-bottom entertainment. However, he commented negatively on the handling of the Zygon subplot, stating that it just kind of fizzles out a little after strong build-up, which is true, because that ending that we'll get to overshadows the entire episode because it's that big of a deal.
Yeah.
I do think one of the big problems in this, in fact, we're kind of done with the reviews there, so I'll move on. The biggest problem I have with it, I don't want to be a fanboy, so I'm going to start with my big negative.
Okay.
This episode, and I don't blame Moffat for this because I understand the pressure he's under and I understand how hard it must be to weave all this in, especially when you've got to add a new Doctor. You can't just do Eccleston. Especially the first half of this special is all over the place. It is such a weird structure because you basically keep hopping to the 3 different timelines, don't you? With before they all meet, you're constantly hopping between Smith. It's got a strong start where the TARDIS gets picked up by the helicopter and Matt Smith's hanging out of it. He goes to see the painting. That's all very cool. We both commented how cool an effect that was, the 3D painting. And then it almost flashes back to John Hurt, but that flashback lasts like 15 straight minutes.
Yeah.
And then comes back to Matt Smith, and then goes to David Tennant, and then goes back to John Hurt.
The David Tennant one is about 5-6 minutes at least before another Doctor arrives.
It's a little bit of a weird structure, and then it is almost... I wonder if at one point it was meant to be a 2-parter and not a single special, because it is almost 2 episodes. It's your Zygon episode and your Time War episode.
Yeah.
And I can see where thematically he's tried to link them, because the idea is that Kate Stewart's going to have to make a similar decision to him, where she's going to have to blow up the whole of London to save the world, and he says, doesn't he, you'll never be able to live with this. But it doesn't quite work.
As well. It feels a bit rushed, and I wonder if he ran out of time to really tart up the script as much as it could have had.
I am fairly certain from what I know that every stage of this production ran out of time.
Yeah.
They ran out of time with the script because basically he'd written a special with no Doctors in it because he didn't know he was going to have any Doctors.
Yeah.
So it was all going to be about the companions and like how their lives were after travelling with the Doctor, which, sure, I guess that would be kind of interesting, but you kind of want the Doctor in your 50th anniversary Doctor Who special.
But then I suppose they could have introduced John Hurt as the Doctor for that special.
Yeah,
that would have been a
they
cool
could have
way
done
around
that.
it. And then it's like the missing Doctor.
Yeah. And then I do believe that, like, because obviously you can't push this. This has to come out on a specific day, which is November 23rd.
Yeah.
Then again, saying that, the 60th is not airing on November 23rd. It's airing November 25th. So I guess you can push them because they want it to be on a Saturday specifically.
To be fair, I don't think people will mind you flexing a little bit. Like
and I'm pretty sure they basically like ran short on filming time. I'm pretty sure they ran short on effects because there's some really good effects for Doctor Who in this. And there's some effects that are like... done in 5 minutes, was it? This little time vortex you've just done?
Yeah, the time vortex looked like garbage.
That really looks like it was done in 5 minutes, doesn't it?
No, just fuck it. We've got so much else to do. Just select default vortex.
I was gonna say, it looks like they had the assets somewhere from something, probably from like an old episode of Red Dwarf or something.
Something like that.
Just went, click, that'll do.
Drag into timeline. There was, because you only really see it at the same angle every single time as well. So it's not like they had like a fully 3D asset that they would move around.
Yeah. But yeah, that's my big negative with it.
Yeah.
Because I can be objective, even though I love Doctor Who and I really like this episode. It is very messy. I mean, I've seen that episode probably 5 times now, and the beginning bit is still messy.
Yeah.
For me. And there's a few leaps in it where you're a bit like... Well, to be fair, they throw it away with a line, don't they? Which is, the Time War is meant to be time-locked.
Yeah.
How do they get there? and they kind of and David Tennant just goes, "We shouldn't even be here," and you kind of just get a glimpse of Billie Piper as the moment. And you're like, "I guess she did it."
Yeah, moment.
That's all we're gonna get.
Yeah, that's
so
as much of an acknowledgement. And to be fair, most people probably won't care.
Yeah.
But except for hardcore Who fans or Whovians. What I was gonna mention was one of the things where it seemed that they ran out of time was there's some editing choices on this that feel a bit dodgy. There's one transition in particular that is really shit.
Kate Stewart, where it transitions to the Tower of London
while she's talking,
really bad, isn't it? Yeah.
Or it's like, just make it a smash cut then. Just don't bother. Like,
it feels really out of place, doesn't it?
Yeah, it feels like they're just trying to shut up already. Like, we've had a fucking enough of you.
Yeah, it's almost
rude.
It almost feels like they were told, right, you've got exactly 77 minutes, because that's how long it is.
Yeah.
Not 1 second over, and they edited it, and it was like 77 minutes and 5 seconds.
Yeah.
And they're like, shit, where are we going to cut 5 seconds from? Here, fade.
Yeah.
Hey, I did that in some of my uni projects. It can't be more than 25 minutes. Oh shit, we're 26 minutes. How are we going to make that space? Literally go through and make every cut super tight and just be like, crossfade.
Yeah. So
I'm not going to lie, I have done the trick before where you just speed up the credit crawl.
Yeah.
Because it's like, no one reads these anyway. Everyone leaves the cinema.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. So there's that one. The other one as well, I thought, was there's a couple of points in that. And to be fair, they're kind of rare. It's not overly common. But there's a couple of points where one shot won't match the following shot. Where someone's moved and then it looks really jarring how the camera's...
The big one I noticed is when they hand them the letter right at the beginning of the letter from Queen Elizabeth I. In one shot, Clara, the companion, takes the letter.
Yeah.
In one shot, and then when it cuts to a shot of all four of them, Kate Stewart is still holding the letter, and Clara takes it again.
Yep.
And it was like, Yeah,
you could have saved your 5 seconds there instead of on the transition.
You took it at the wrong time, Clara, I believe.
Yeah.
So my other problem with this episode, just to get out of the way, and you can argue that you don't need them because it's more about the theme and not them in particular. I would like more Daleks.
Right.
If you're going to show the Time War...
Make the Daleks a bigger part of it, maybe.
Yeah, because the Daleks are not the villains in this episode, really. No. It's the Zygons are the villains, and then the Time War...
And they're nowhere near as cool.
No, although it is a nice little fact, the Zygons, so they're a classic era enemy.
Yep.
And growing up, they were David Tennant's favourite Doctor Who villains, and they never did them while he was the Doctor. Oh. So then they brought him back and went, "Shall we do Zygons?" And he was like, "Yes." And then he snugs one.
Yeah.
Big red rubbery thing covered in suckers. Venom sacs in the tongue. I feel like David Tennant's Doctor 10 is the closest Doctor Who's ever gotten to Captain Kirk.
Right.
In terms of boning aliens. I reckon Kirk could snog a Zygon.
Kirk
could try and put his penis in one of the little sucker things.
Yeah. In fact, they'd be like, "Oh no, we're freaks, but no, please, Captain, leave us alone."
Captain, this is illogical.
Have you seen someone's done an edit of original series scenes to make it seem like Kirk and Spock are in an aggressive gay relationship?
No,
it's quite funny.
Who's the top? I feel like Spock's the top.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just make it painless and quick.
What?
There's a bit where Spock says, "Just make it painless and quick."
But he's the top.
I don't know.
Is he the bottom?
To be honest, I'm going to be honest, this is an early 2000s edit that's probably now incredibly un-PC.
Yeah.
Because of what they found funny about homosexuality in the early 2000s.
Yeah. To be fair.
Not really translated well into the modern era.
So basically, your basic setup for Day of the Doctor is... the 11th Doctor, which is Matt Smith, and the current incumbent Doctor, gets picked up by UNIT, which is like Britain's secret X-Files organisation, and given a letter from Queen Elizabeth I, and taken into an art gallery, which I assume is like the Tate Modern or something, and gets shown a painting called No More or Gallifrey Falls. It's got two different titles, and it's Time Lord art. And like all Time Lord things, it's bigger on the inside. It's an actual frozen moment of time. They also get shown another painting where the glass on the front of the picture has been smashed from within the painting, and there were figures in the painting that are now no longer in the painting.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you've got John Hurt plays the War Doctor on the last day of the Time War, where he's about to press the big red button and annihilate the Time Lords and the Daleks together, which this has been the whole driving force of New Who for 7 years at this point.
Yeah.
So it's a monumental thing to do, because they never showed it on screen.
Yeah.
Ever.
I notice how everyone's dressed the same on Gallifrey. They do this
Budgets.
in Star Trek as well. They do this in all sci-fi.
Yeah, it's
but
budgets.
everyone wears the same costume on different planets. But it's like, humans don't wear this. Like, in the same town. Like, we live in the same town as many people who all dress differently.
But it's that sci-fi shorthand, isn't it? It's the same as how... We were actually talking about this the other day, weren't we? In sci-fi, you will have the planet of the Daleks, the planet of Klingons. There's no planet of humans.
Well, it's Earth.
No, that's what I'm saying, there's not. We have monkeys, cows, horses.
I see.
All sorts of species.
There are species on Kronos.
But what I mean is
They've got
time.
targs.
A lot of time, they don't bother with stuff like that, do they? Because it's got to be shorthand. Same as it's usually homogenized. Fantasy worlds do this as well.
Yeah.
It's homogenized cultures. Also, if you come to Earth, there's hundreds of different cultures with different traditions and things like that.
There's hundreds of different variations of just spiders.
Yeah.
Let alone every other type of species.
Whereas in, say, Star Trek, you would go to Vulcan, and it's, right, these are Vulcans, they all kind of look like this.
There's a type of bear.
And they run on logic.
Yeah, there's a type of bear as well.
Yeah, and it's same in fantasy worlds, isn't it? It's like, you'll have it'll be like, all right, this is the land where orcs live. There's nothing else. Just orcs, and all the orcs are the same, because, let's be honest, this already overly long fantasy book would be 5 times the length if we went through the entire system of orc politics, orc tradition.
Yeah, and they all think the same. Like, orcs all think the same, elves all think the same.
Yeah.
They're all the same sort of thing, apart from maybe the one friend who will dare to think differently.
But it's something you kind of have to do, or else your thing becomes boring.
Or overly complicated.
That's the thing. There is such a thing as too much setup.
Yeah.
And too much exploration. But basically, a time vortex opens by the moment which, as Rory said, it's got a physical interface which chooses the form of Rose Tyler, aka Bad Wolf. And
where's Bad Wolf from? Because
that's from the end of the Eccleston season. She becomes Bad Wolf.
What is Bad Wolf?
So basically, no one knows. It's not a great story arc, to be honest.
Okay.
Basically, long story short, all the way through the Eccleston season, they keep seeing the words Bad Wolf everywhere, and they don't know what it is. And Eccleston, when he finally cottons on that he's seeing it everywhere, starts to think that it is some sort of malevolent force. And then obviously the Daleks are revealed as the villains at the end of the season, and he's like, well, Daleks can't have done that. They can't have followed me all through time and done that. And obviously he sends Rose home, doesn't he? Because he thinks he's going to lose.
Yeah.
And Rose, desperate to get to him, breaks open the TARDIS console and absorbs the time vortex.
Right.
So basically Bad Wolf is Rose when she's absorbed the time vortex. And she's got those super glowy powers, and she Thanoses all the Daleks 10 years before Thanos was around.
Right.
15 years before Thanos was around.
Wow.
She Thanoses all the Daleks, and she has spread the message Bad Wolf all the way through the universe to lead the Doctor to that point in time.
Sure.
Which doesn't really work, because I don't quite know how just the word Bad Wolf does that. And then obviously Eccleston has to absorb the time vortex back from her, because she's human and it will kill her, and it causes him to regenerate into David Tennant.
Right. New teeth, that's interesting.
Yes. New teeth. Where was I? Oh yes, Barcelona. All 3 Doctors meet. The best part of any multi-Doctor special is when the Doctors meet and don't get along, because he never gets along with himself.
Nope.
There's an obligatory penis joke, which we probably didn't need, but it's funny anyway, when Matt Smith's got a bigger sonic screwdriver than David Tennant, and then David Tennant goes, compensating for what? Regeneration, it's a lottery. They mock David Tennant's shoes because he wears Converse and they keep calling him sand shoes.
Yeah, I don't understand why they're called sand shoes, though.
I have heard that insult before, but I don't know where it comes, like where it originates from.
It's from somewhere where you don't wear Converses in the desert
I don't
or
think
on the
so.
beach.
I don't think so, but I've heard it before.
Yeah.
I just don't know what the origins of it are.
No, strange.
They mock the bow tie, of course. The fact that I do like that they call out the fact that modern doctors all use the sonic screwdriver like it's a weapon.
Yeah, like they point
They're
it
always
at stuff
like
as
this.
a defensive gun thing. Yeah.
Which none of the classic... In fact, the classic doctors barely use the sonic screwdriver.
Yeah.
Same with the psychic paper. They barely use it.
Right.
To be fair, the Doctor, they've kind of eased off of him using psychic paper in the newer seasons as well.
Never
but
even heard of it, but...
Oh, it's slightly psychic paper. It's how it basically they wrote it in as how he fakes his way into buildings because it shows you what he wants you to see.
Right.
So he'll go in and make it look like an FBI badge, let's say.
Right.
But then there's one episode that's quite funny where they meet a race that's literally too stupid for it to work on them.
Right.
And they're just like, that's just a blank piece of paper. It's because they're literally not imaginative enough to imagine it.
Right.
But yeah. And basically, I guess what the whole episode is, there's a bunch of typical Doctor Who shenanigans running around. They're on the hunt for shape-shifting Zygons. There's a very funny bit where David Tennant thinks it's a bunny rabbit.
Yeah.
And he does a typical... That's a very typical 10th Doctor speech. He got to a point where he was doing those all the time. I'm the Doctor. I'm 900 years old. I'm going to stop you. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
And you're basically just a rabbit, aren't you? Yeah. Okay. Well, general warning.
I see the one thing that they could have done with that, they wouldn't have done, because why would they? But was just have a Scottish guy run in. Could have been Capaldi. He's running, goes, it's one of the most evil, blood-sucking things you'll ever meet. Yeah. What, behind the rabbit? It is the rabbit.
Yeah.
You know what? They should just remake... They'll never do this, but they should remake Monty Python's Life of the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
But all of the main characters are just the Doctor.
Yeah.
All the different actors.
Is that
of
the
Doctor.
one? Is that the one that's got the nonsense? It's just a flesh wound joke
Yes.
in it.
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen that. That's the only Monty Python I've seen, I think.
I love that film.
I did not like.
Oh.
Other than that bit, that was the best bit.
That is a
It's
really
a
good
flesh wound.
Yeah.
His arms are off.
Chicken.
But really, the main theme we're dealing with here is it's all about the Doctor's decision to have committed genocide in what he thought was the name of good.
Yeah.
It feels a little bit too close to home today.
Oh, man.
But yeah, hopefully not by the time this comes out.
Hopefully a ceasefire.
Yeah, and it's about him finding another way.
Yes.
And there's a load of fan service as well, which was nice for me, not so much for you, because I imagine most of it was just. Whew.
Yeah.
I
didn't even recognise Tom Baker at the end. I was like,
to be fair, he's old.
Then?
To be fair, he's old as shit.
He didn't have the scarf.
No,
some other bird had the scarf.
I was going to
on.
say, did you notice Osgood had the Tom Baker scarf?
And then so when this old dude walks in, and I'm like, oh, is he an old companion? Like, no, that's Tom Baker. I'm like, where's his fucking scarf?
No, to be fair, I thought you'd recognise the voice because he's got a really iconic voice, Tom Baker.
Yeah.
He's the narrator from God. As much as I hate the show, he's the narrator from Little Britain.
Yeah, Britain.
Yeah.
He didn't really have that much of a booming voice, but he was older when he did this.
Yeah.
About 10 years later, and he was already old when he did Little Britain.
Yeah.
So
they bring Osgood back in the Capaldi era, and she then not only does she have the scarf, she adds the Seventh Doctor's question marks on her lapels, and it's like, okay, stop.
Yeah, no, it's getting a bit much.
But yeah,
because I'm sorry, the question marks on the lapels. While I'm sure it was done by the Doctor first, I now can't help but think Riddler.
I don't know, because didn't '60s Riddler do it?
No, he didn't have question marks.
Didn't he have
on
a
the
question
lapels.
mark?
He had a question mark on it. So it was Frank Gorshin played the Riddler on TV, and he had basically just a skin tight green fucking what would be a morph suit but without the head. And a question mark was painted on the belly.
Yeah.
But that's it.
So they never did it with the Doctor until it was the 6th Doctor they started it with. 6 and 7 are the only two they did it with.
Yeah.
And it was basically because the 6th Doctor was pitched as a really dark Doctor.
Right.
And Colin Baker was a very good actor at doing dark stuff.
Yeah.
And then the BBC went, this show's for children, it's too scary, and decided to make him a clown, which is why he has that ridiculous multicoloured patchwork.
Oh.
You must have seen it, that scene where they're all...
at the very end when you've got all the doctors.
I mean, all the doctors dress crazy, but he takes the cake. And it's such a shame because it's so antithetical to his performance.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, we've got to do branding because it's the 80s. It's all about branding.
Oh, let's get He-Man style toys out there.
Yeah, literally. That's when they also introduced...
K9?
The Whomobile.
Oh, shit. Yeah, I've heard about the Whomobile.
Yeah. No, K9 was before. K9 was Tom Baker's era.
Right.
And quite well liked. They did try several times to make K9 spin-offs, none of which worked.
No.
Because K9's fine as like a random little character in your show.
Not as
the lead of a whole show. Thank you.
What's weird is when you say the Whomobile, I know what you're talking about. I know it's that really shit-looking car that
With a question mark
on it. But I just think of the band The Who and them driving around in some sort of fucking customized vehicle.
It just... Like, I understand you're trying to brand, but think about this logically. Why would a man who has a box that can go anywhere in time and space
have a car?
Need a car?
Yeah. So, talking about vehicles, actually, that was something that I called out right at the start. Now, I know it's a modern one.
Oh, the motorbike.
The motorbike that What's-Her-Face rides.
Clara.
Because, sorry, I don't really remember.
You don't think Jenna Coleman's incredibly memorable?
Oh, she is. Like, I mean, her performance in this is... But I mean, because I haven't really watched the show. That's what I meant. Sorry, I should have clarified that.
It's just because I'm a Clara stan, so...
No, that's fine. I don't know who Stan is. There's...
This is Stan.
Yeah.
That's where it comes from, you know? Why. That's where the slang comes from, though. Did you know that? Yeah, Gen Z call being a fan of something being a stan.
Right.
It comes from the Eminem song.
Oh, I thought it was because it was connected to Stanislavski.
No, they're not that intelligent.
I didn't really think it was Stanislavski. I knew it would be.
No. Talk about your bike.
Yeah, so the bike that Clara rides is a Triumph motorcycle. Now, it's a modern one, I hasten to add. It's not a classic Triumph. As soon as I saw that, though, I was like, fuck off. And the reason I was saying fuck off isn't because Triumph is about... Far from it. Triumph is a legendary brand of motorcycle. It's not really the sort of motorcycle young women ride. And I know that sounds...
Stereotyping, yeah.
But, hear me out, right? Because I think I might need to relate it to something else to make that not sound really shitty of me. But Triumph is a classic brand of bike. Like Royal Enfield. Exactly.
Or Harley Davidson.
Yeah.
Not comparable.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of. But the thing is, with Harley Davidson, it's at least a big known brand name.
Yeah, it's got like public
among
awareness.
Everyone, right? Triumph doesn't have that same level. Like BSA, Royal Enfield, Triumph, Brough Superiors, or Brough, I suppose, would be the brand name. Even Indian motorcycles.
Is it that are they luxury though? Are they super expensive? Is that are you saying it's unfeasible that she'd be able to afford one?
It's not that. It's the type of brands they are. They are favourites of older generations because they remember them when they were younger. My dad has a BSA, which is why I know so much about older bikes. His friends ride classic bikes as well. So BSAs, Broughs, Triumphs, things like that. Younger people don't... I've never heard any young person ever... And this could just be me, but I've very rarely heard, or never actually heard, a young person going, you know what I really want? I want a Triumph. I want a Brough Superior. I want an old BSA. Yeah. No, what they want a Kawasaki Ninja.
Right.
Which is a speed bike. Yeah. Or they want, very few people like me, I'm probably one of the youngest people who just wanted a fucking cruiser that was comfortable. Most people want speed bikes when they're younger. I never did.
Yeah.
But because of that, they want if they're going to go for a cruiser style bike, they'll get Harleys. Yeah. Because it's got the brand name and recognition behind it. Very rarely will they go for any other brand. Indian possibly because it's the other Harley style brand, but again, both American.
Yeah.
Very rarely will they go for anything that's more niche.
Yeah.
You know, because they'll either want dirt bikes because they can go riding in the dust with it. They'll want Kawasaki Ninjas because they're fast and they're Japanese, so they ride really well. They'll just want some Chinese shit, in which case you won't be getting a Triumph. Or they want Harley Davidson because it's a big brand.
Would it be unlikely then that there'd just be one sitting in a shop that you could see and go, oh yeah, I like the look of that one? Because a lot of people don't look at brand names, do they? Like, so obviously I don't have bikes because I don't ride vehicles, but using a different thing, phones. A few years ago, I made a terrible, terrible mistake, Rory, about 10 years ago. I bought an Alcatel phone.
Oh, no, Jamie, no.
But here's the thing, I'd never heard of Alcatel.
Yeah, they're French.
Yeah, they're awful.
Yeah, that's because they're French.
I had the phone, I think it's the shortest period of time I ever owned a phone for. I think I kept it for 3 months before I was like, I can't use this.
You know what? I'm going to applaud you for that. You lasted 3 months. That is 2 months and 3 weeks longer than I would have lasted.
Well, it was...
They're garbage handsets.
But this was the thing, was I know some people do. I know some people go looking specifically for an iPhone or a Samsung. I just went, oh, that looks cool.
I'll have that. It's cheap.
I've never heard of it. I'll have it. It was a very small phone, probably about that. This was when, do you remember when the popular
flip
thing
phones?
was get? No, it wasn't a flip. Do you remember when the popularity was get phones as small as you possibly can?
Yeah.
I tell you how big it was. It was that big. I'm holding a thing up to Rory now. It's honestly
basically just hold your headphones like earpods.
Yeah, it's like an earpod case. It was about that thick. It was quite thick and had some weight to it.
Right.
And the reason I thought it was cool and immediately realised it was not cool the first time I pulled it out in front of my friends and did it, and they didn't go, oh, that's cool and unique. Instead, they were just like, dork. It was a touchscreen, but not with your finger.
You needed to have a stylus.
You had to pop a stylus out the bottom.
I had a Nokia that did that, and it was like, what I liked about the Nokia was you could look like you're really judging someone while typing a text, because you're so camp. I used to do it all the time. I'd look at my friend and I'd just turn away like with my nose on pattern while I'm texting, and it would make it look super camp and super judgy.
And basically what was shit about the phone was it was actually just too small.
Yeah.
So you couldn't get any cool apps on it or out like that. Even reading texts on it was difficult because of the way they were crammed together. But the touchscreen didn't work.
No.
Like it would barely pick up the stylus half the time. So then you'd have to press really hard, and then you'd be terrified that you're going to break the screen.
Yeah.
And if I remember right, the battery on it was garbage as well.
Yeah. Alcatel is literally one of the most garbage brands of phone there is.
So
I used to sell them, that's how
So my point was, I went there and I didn't buy that. So could she, obviously we're debating something that doesn't matter, but could she have just gone to a bike shop and gone, well, that looks cool, not really known what a Triumph is? Or is that unrealistic that would happen?
Unlikely with a Triumph.
Would they not have, had one in stock?
Number one, there's not many bike shops anymore. They all seem to be closing down. But
This was 10 years ago,
This was 10 years ago. Triumphs aren't a major commodity that was selling a lot. Even at this point, 10 years ago, Chinese bikes were coming in, Lex Moto, things like that.
Okay.
Certainly now, it would almost certainly be a Chinese
Let's
bike.
be honest, what the realistic reason. So, the only other character reason I can think it could be...
Someone had a Triumph on set
on the
who was an older man, I guarantee it.
Yeah.
And he went, well, let's just get a young rider to ride this. A young person.
Yeah, the BBC won't let us rent a motorbike just for this one scene.
But Dave's got a fucking Triumph. Let's just get some young biker lady to ride that for a minute.
Yeah,
it's clearly not Clara riding it.
Yeah, ride it into the TARDIS.
Yeah.
Which is cool. I like that transition.
It's a really cool shot, to be fair.
But yes, that is the realistic. The only other reason I can even half think of to justify it is her character is later shown that, she's really into, old stuff.
Oh, that makes sense then.
She's
I don't
into,
have that context.
Classic literature and stuff like that,
that's
Jane
fine,
Austen and stuff.
Yeah, so if she's into retro stuff, it would make a lot more sense. It's just obviously there's no context.
It doesn't
for that in this
really.
episode.
I think that's the only time she's ever shown riding a motorbike. I think at one point, there's a couple of points where she rides a scooter.
Okay.
But it's like a generic scooter that I don't think you ever see the brand name for.
Right.
Who knows? Maybe it's a reference. Maybe in classic Doctor Who, someone rode a Triumph and I don't know about it. Maybe. And they were just like, oh, let's stick this bike in.
But it's a modern Triumph, so it wouldn't have even worked for that.
I don't know. But so what was it like as someone who's not super au fait with Doctor Who? What was it like to be just plonked down in the middle of this monumental episode and gone, here, watch this?
Okay.
Confusing, I imagine, at the start, especially.
So there is another level that I'm not going to be able to answer.
Okay.
I'm someone who does not know a lot about Who, but I do know a lot about sci-fi. I think that this would read badly for someone who didn't like sci-fi to begin with.
Right.
It's far too sci-fi
Yeah.
for someone who doesn't like sci-fi. So let's get that out of the way.
Yeah.
Because it's confusing for me as someone who does like sci-fi. Now, I will give it this. The main emotional storyline of this episode holds even if you don't know the characters.
Yeah.
Because it's well acted. It actually does build up the central theme of, making that final decision.
Yeah. I teared up a little bit.
Yeah.
Which I was
did.
surprised. I've
did.
seen it 5 times. And when she's doing the bit where she's like, be a doctor, I was just like...
Yeah, when the 2 doctors arrive in John Hurt's time to help, be there with him to make that final decision, that was really cool. I liked that. So the emotional through line of this episode holds true, even if you don't know Who very well. Perfect. It's mostly details. Number 1, who the fuck are Unit? You had to explain who Unit are to me. And the whole episode opens with basically almost as a cold open of them somehow picking up the TARDIS on a helicopter and swinging him somewhere else on a terrible green screen stunt effect. And you're like, okay. And he's like, oh, it's Unit. Great. Who the fuck is Unit? Because it's not like if they went, oh, it's MI5. Okay, cool. I know what MI5 is. Unit doesn't really exist.
Yeah.
But okay, fine. That's my ignorance of not being a Who fan. I get that. It's not even Torchwood, who was had at least had a series on their own around Who. Unit never. There's never been a Unit show. Standalone Unit show.
Do you know what? I think there almost was in the 80s, and it got pulled at the last minute, I think.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. Basically, if you were a classic Who fan, you would definitely know Unit, because they were literally in it for 20 years.
Oh, right, okay.
That main girl, the leader of Unit, Kate Lethbridge-Stewart, she mentioned her dad, Alistair Lethbridge-Stewart, didn't she?
Yeah.
He was a recurring character all the way through classic Who, and very sadly, he's actually dead now.
Right.
He actually died before they had a chance to give him a real appearance in modern Who.
Right.
Which is why they introduced his daughter as a character.
Okay.
But you're right, for a modern audience, Torchwood would have been the better option.
Yeah.
I think in storyline, Torchwood is gone by this point, though, I think.
I think they kind of mentioned Torchwood, don't they? Because they've
They had
got
Captain Jack's vortex manipulator.
Yeah. I recognise that. There was... so that kind of needed more explanation for a non-Who audience.
Yeah.
The idea of the aliens in this, fine. They introduced that perfectly well. I understood what was going on.
Yeah, shapeshifters aren't exactly a new concept, are they?
And they explained the red bloodsucky thing, and they play it for laughs. It works perfect. It's
fine. A machine that goes ding.
Yeah, I like that. That was cool. So the introduction of that they introduced the idea of Time Lord art really well. That was brilliant. I'm trying to think of what else didn't work, because Unit gets introduced out of fucking nowhere. You've got... There's certain companions and old Who actors like Tom Baker that I didn't recognise.
Yeah. That's
probably more on me, though, because I think a lot of people, even if they didn't really know Who, might recognise Tom Baker. It may just be me as an idiot.
Yeah.
So,
one bit...
take that one with a pinch of salt, if you will. And there's a lot of references to... Like, they make the reference to Rose. Obviously, I understood that because I've watched the extra one, but most people who don't watch Who probably won't know who she is. But it doesn't really affect the show too much. But there are references that Clara makes that... I can't remember them exactly, but there are some references that Clara makes where I'm just like, what?
I remember Trenzalore was one you had to ask about. Where they keep saying we're going to Trenzalore.
Yeah.
And I saw where we're buried. That is on... Obviously, you got to remember as well, this is obviously taken from the middle of a run in a show. That's actually all set up for the next episode.
Right.
Which obviously, as someone just watching it as a standalone, is like, this is worthless information. I don't need this.
Yeah, this could have been trimmed, but I understand that if this is I believe it's a penultimate episode to the season.
So this aired 23rd of November.
Yep.
And then on the 25th of December, which was the next episode,
Yep.
Matt Smith leaves.
Right.
He regenerates.
Right. So this was the penultimate episode, at least for Matt Smith.
Yeah.
Yeah, seeing it at least in the context of that season probably would have made more sense.
Yes.
On its own, those lines are worthless.
Yeah.
I have no idea what you're going on about. The other things that aren't introduced, but you do see, you've got obviously the Doctor Who fan woman.
Yeah, Osgood.
Yeah, is she? And she's wearing the
what's
Tom
her
Baker
first
scarf.
name? Her first name's really weird. You don't find it out till comparison. Petronella is her first name.
Petronella
Osgood.
Okay. But yeah, that character is kind of okay, whatever. And you get the guy who eventually the Doctor calls on to move the painting, who's kind of given a semi-serious role, but very briefly. Yeah. And it's like, who the fuck are you? I don't know who you are either.
So one of the key differences that I think you'll have noticed between RTD era Doctor Who, which is Eccleston and Tennant, and Smith era, I'm not saying it's worse at all, but RTD is much more straightforward. His episodes tend to be the TARDIS lands. So if he'd written this, it would be the TARDIS lands, they deal with the Zygons, the episode wraps up. Moffat, in a positive sense, uses the fact that time travel is part of the show. So you get, don't you, the guy who you've just mentioned answers his phone near the beginning and he's like, hang on, that can't be. Yeah, whatever. And you don't know what's happened.
Yeah.
And later on, you see that the Doctor, who in his timeline has just left the room, is now calling him from the future.
Yeah.
And he also did one thing I really like in this, just because it's a cool little thing that I can't believe they'd never done before. I love the fact that they realise it's the same sonic screwdriver.
Yeah.
And that if they start a calculation with an older Doctor, it will still be going.
Yeah.
What I don't like, I like the joke, but the problem is it just puts an unnecessary bent in the plot, is they're locked in this cell, they have a good conversation about how many children were on Gallifrey that day, and then Clara just opens the door, and the joke in the immediate term, the joke is funny. It's like, oh, 3 geniuses and they didn't think to open the door.
Yeah.
But then it leads to this whole, oh, the real Queen Elizabeth is actually the one who's still alive, but she's posing as the Zygon leader. Yeah. And that's just an unnecessary complication that feels like Moffat only had to write that in because he wanted the joke.
Yeah. Now, the other problem I have with that joke, quote unquote, number one, it worked really well. The joke itself works. Don't have an issue with that. They never call it back again. And what I mean by that is it should have required the John Hurt Doctor, whatever the final situation was, the resolve at the end, should have required a 400-year calculation.
Well, no, to be fair, it did. That's the point. The reason they do the bit with the screwdriver is they then realise that the way to save Gallifrey is they had to start the calculation in the TARDIS right back at the First Doctor.
Yeah.
What is never explained is how they get in touch with the First Doctor. No. But seeing as the First Doctor is long since dead and they only had archive footage, I will accept it.
Sure. Okay. But I just think it would have been better if the wartime Doctor was before the First Doctor. This may be shaking up canon, I don't really know. But if he was before the First Doctor...
Chibnall has since introduced Doctors before the First Doctor.
So if they'd done that, and then he starts the calculation, the other Doctors don't necessarily know yet that the calculation is running.
Yeah.
They could have then had it and set that up more in a better way.
Yeah.
That the calculation was already running before all the other Doctors we've seen.
Yeah.
But again, this is me from a perspective of ignorance... introducing shit into Who canon that I could be dipping in someone else's pool without...
of course.
Without actually knowing. You'd be like, well, actually, this happens, and that would nullify that. So,
but yeah, the Zygon plot does kind of just fizzle out.
Yeah.
Basically, you get that bit where they're both Kate Stewart, and they've got to deactivate this bomb or let it go off. You get some cool lines. I really like the line where the Zygon before they wipe their memories, the Zygon is trying to convince her to turn the bomb off.
Yeah.
And she goes, we only have to agree to live. And she goes, sadly, we can only agree to die. I quite like that line. That's a good line.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of, the best way to get the negotiation is don't know which side you're on.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
The problem is it's basically just a triumphant moment of the Doctor standing on a table and the music goes up, and then we move on to the Time War stuff.
Yeah, and we ignore there's no... I would like to have seen more of the negotiation and how that goes.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of swiftly move on. Yeah, that's kind of resolved itself somehow. But we never see the resolution.
No, they do come back to it in the Capaldi era. And you basically get a new negotiation scene where you actually get to go through it more.
Good.
But that's arguably 2 years too late.
Yeah.
Because it kind of should have been in this.
Yeah. Yeah, it does feel like this should have been a two-parter.
Yeah. There's a lot of in-jokes which are really good, that are classic in-jokes. There's obviously David Tennant's speech. There's the fact that Tennant... Because classic Doctors never kissed their companions. Tennant kisses fucking all of them. And I do like the bit where he's like, does this happen a lot in the future? It does start to happen, yeah. One that's a classic one which you wouldn't know, but it's every time the Doctors meet themselves, when they walk into Matt Smith's TARDIS and Tennant goes, oh, you've redecorated. I don't like it. That goes all the way back to the first ever multi-Doctor story they ever did.
Right.
Where the second Doctor walked into the third Doctor's TARDIS and went, oh, you've redecorated. I don't like it.
Yeah.
And now any time he meets himself...
He doesn't
like what they've done with it. And, the round things. I love the round things. What are the round things? I've no idea.
Yeah, that's the one thing they agreed on, wasn't it? It was the first Doctor's TARDIS design.
And the correct answer is it was made for no money, and they just went, do loads of circles, it'll give it a weird alien look.
Yeah.
It was literally just that.
Yeah, yeah.
Probably they had to actually cut bits out of the set to go use in other props.
Yeah, well, you notice that the round things, I think, are in the museum.
Yes.
On the wall.
They are.
So, because I was like, what the fuck is that on the wall? Like, every other wall is just smooth and white, and then there's other smooth white wall with these circles on it. And then they get to that, and you're like, oh, it's the fucking circles.
Yeah, and it's when they're hinting towards Tom Baker coming in, isn't
Yeah.
it? Because I guess the idea, from what he says, the idea is that eventually the Doctor starts going back through old regenerations. Now,
which I'm guessing is what they might be doing with the new Tenant.
Well, it's a nice touch, but here's why I have a problem with it from a story point of view.
Sure.
It's a nice way to get Tom Baker into it and explain why he looks so much older than when he was the Doctor. But here's why I have a problem with it. In the storyline, the Doctor at this point was supposed to be limited to only 13 lives, 12 regenerations. Because they added...
Capaldi?
John Hurt in.
Right.
And they decided to use, in Tennant's 4th season, there is a bit, I remember being so angry at them, there's a really good episode called Stolen Earth, where the Daleks invade Earth. And the Doctor comes face to face with Rose again for the first time since she's been trapped in that parallel dimension at the end of season 2. And they're running to each other, and it's slow-mo, and they're like, oh, Rose, blah, blah. And a Dalek comes around the corner and shoots him.
Right.
And they drag him into the TARDIS, and she's like, no, Doctor, I finally found you again, you can't die now. And he starts to glow, and Captain Jack's like, it's too late, Rose, he's regenerating. And the episode literally ends with him throwing his arms out and all the gold lights coming out. Incredible end to an episode. I was like 14 at this point. I was like, oh my god, they've somehow they've somehow kept it a secret that Tennant's leaving.
Yeah.
They hadn't. It was a fake out to boost ratings. And what he actually does is he ends up channeling that regeneration energy into his own severed hand because he gets his hand cut off earlier, and it grows a second Doctor. It's really stupid. It's a big misstep. But what Moffat ended up doing was saying that also counted as a regeneration, and he just kept the same face.
Right. Meaning
that Matt Smith is the last Doctor.
Right.
And the whole of that next episode, the one that aired Christmas Day, is that it's Matt Smith. That's it. The Doctor is going to die on Trenzalore.
Yeah.
In a town called Christmas, where no one can tell a lie.
That was a terrible episode as well, if I recall.
No, I quite like it. Some people hate it.
Right.
There's some silly bits in it, like so. It's basically a siege episode where all these different
He's there
races.
for hundreds of years, isn't he?
Yeah, 300 years, I think.
Right.
And basically, all of his enemies have to start improvising because they can't get into the town because of all the defenses he sets up. And one of them is metal detectors. So they build a wooden Cyberman
Right.
that then fires a flamethrower.
What?
It's made of wood, Rory, and it's firing a flamethrower
That's
from
stupid.
its arm. And it's like, oh, Moffat. See what I mean? Good idea, but you didn't think about the execution of
Even a
it.
crossbow.
Yeah. Or just not a wooden Cyberman.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Plastic Cyberman.
And then the gimmick is that the Time Lords, so all the way through Matt Smith's era, there's these cracks he keeps finding in space and time.
It's all them hoes he's been looking
Yeah. And he finds one on Trenzalore, and basically what he's doing is guarding that crack from all these different alien races.
Right.
Because, if I remember right, the Doctor basically can end the entire universe. All he has to do is say his real name into the crack.
Frank.
And basically...
I'd love it if it was just Dave.
Bob, yeah.
After all this, so, what's your name? I'm the Doctor. I'm the Doctor. So it's just say your name. Dave.
Yeah. And what they end up doing that was very cool was it turns out that what's on the other side of these cracks is the pocket dimension that they've just put Gallifrey in at the end of the episode we've just watched.
Right.
And basically, the Doctor realizes he has to seal off all these cracks because it's just like and he's dying and he's old. And Clara begs them through the crack. She's basically like, you know, the Doctor fixed the Time War. He saved you from annihilation. You have to save him. You owe him. So they grant him a new set of regeneration energy. So Capaldi is almost a new first Doctor.
Right.
And then Chibnall came along and went, oh, actually, the Doctor always had infinite regenerations because the Doctor's not a Gallifreyan. They're actually the timeless child that fell through a vortex from another dimension. A parallel universe. And the Time Lords experimented on her, and that's where they got their regeneration powers from.
Right. So a lot less complicated.
It's a lot less... It's just the fact as well that, like, one of the best things about the Doctor is that they're not special. The Doctor's not... they're special to us humans, but as a Time Lord, the Doctor's kind of shit.
Yeah.
And he just steals a TARDIS and runs away.
Yeah.
And that's so much cooler than you were always destined... It's the same reason the I Am Your Father twist in Star Wars is kind of shit. No one wants to say it. But it's much cooler when it's, this farm boy was plucked from obscurity than, you were always the villain's son, you were always going to have to do this.
Yeah. I have to say, I kind of don't mind it in Star Wars as much, but then Star Wars I don't take as seriously as some other things. I don't take this particularly seriously either, but it's what ruined Riddick.
Yes.
In the first Riddick film, which was Pitch Black,
yeah.
he wasn't a side character. He was like a secondary main, but he wasn't the lead character. That was the female captain. What made him awesome was that he was a criminal who'd replaced his eyes so he could be a better criminal and a better killer. And he was fucking hard, and you didn't know if you could ever trust him. And in fact, it kind of proves that you couldn't trust him at one point until something happens to change his mind. But yeah, so basically Riddick was this cool, hard badass with these unique eyeballs. Then they do, because his character becomes really popular from that, they do the film The Chronicles of Riddick, even though it's only the second fucking film. Chronicles. Jesus Christ. But anyway, they call it The Chronicles of Riddick, and throughout that film, he starts off just fine, a criminal, back in prison, finding his way out. I'll kill you with my teacup, or something like that. And basically, it then turns out at the end, it's like, well, he's actually got Furian blood, and the anger that he feels that makes him kill is just part of his species, and he was destined to be king, and now he will be King Riddick. And you're like, you've completely neutered the cool factor of this character by making him royal blood, always of the throne. That's not the character to do it with. What made him cool wasn't that he was royal blood man.
Yeah.
It was that he was hardened criminal that might have some semblance of a heart somewhere. Yeah. That's what worked. Yeah. You fucked it.
Yeah.
straight away by introducing that element. So yeah, I do see your point.
Yeah.
Sometimes you introduce this idea of, oh, but they're always from royalty, and you're just like, you ruined it.
Yeah.
You broke it.
So let's wrap up with the big ending, which is probably the biggest fan service moment in television history.
Yeah.
And what's hilarious is hang on, let me do the maths. 6 years later, the MCU would basically rip this off. Basically, they realise that the way to save Gallifrey is they can trap it in Time Lord art, freeze it in a single moment of time
And that
in a
causes
pocket
the Daleks
dimension.
to destroy each other by accident.
Yeah, because they're surrounding the planet and all constantly firing on the planet.
When the planet disappears, they blow themselves up.
Yeah. And yet somehow Daleks survive, because that's what Daleks do.
Yeah.
Never believe someone when they say they've killed the last Dalek.
I think the reason is again, that fits in with the Nazi allegory that the Daleks always were meant to have. We've annihilated the Nazi regime entirely, and yet neo-Nazis still pop up.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of works in a weird way.
Yeah.
Whether it's intended that way or not is another thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely holds up. It's like, oh, the Nazis are all gone. Oh, thank God for that.
Oh,
Oh,
they're
yeah, but
back.
I've got this swastika tattoo on my forehead now,
Yeah.
and I've decided I don't like this species,
Yeah.
people, and these people. And you're like, oh,
Yeah.
we got rid of
We're
you.
supposed to be done with this.
Yeah.
And they basically realise that if they run this calculation in the TARDIS for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, they can teleport Gallifrey out of there and freeze it in an instant of time.
Nice.
So you get this lovely bit where the three doctors that are in the special, Tennant, Matt Smith and John Hurt, they're talking to the War Council of Gallifrey, and they're like, this is the only option, but you'd still have hope, blah, blah, blah. And the War Council are like, okay, do it. And all of the doctors turn up, all of the ones there's ever been up to this point, through archive footage, because a lot of them are dead and a lot of them wouldn't return.
Yeah.
You got a little tease of Capaldi.
Yeah, you get his eyebrows.
The eyebrows, yeah. So at this point, people knew Capaldi was the incoming Doctor. He'd been announced. But we didn't think we'd be seeing him until the end of the Christmas special when Matt Smith regenerates.
Yeah. It turns out he's involved in this part of the Time War as well.
Yeah, I mean, they just brought him in and literally spent
Filmed his
30
eyebrows.
seconds doing his eyebrows, because they're very iconic eyebrows. As he says when he's regenerated, dear God, look at the eyebrows. You could take bottle tops off with these. And then he says the way he realises he's Scottish is he's going on a rant about his appearance, and he goes, and why are my eyebrows so cross? They're crosser than the rest of my face. They're independently cross. They probably want to seed from the rest of my face and start their own independent union of eyebrows. Oh, God, I'm Scottish, aren't I? There's loads of Scottish... So, I don't know if you know, but Stephen Moffat is Scottish as well.
Right.
During the Capaldi era, there are loads of Scottish independence jokes. He makes a joke about how every time Britain colonises a new planet, the Scots immediately declare independence.
well, let's bring Star Trek into this with Scotland. It's not good for Scotland. In fact, it's not good for Star Trek. It's worse for Star Trek than it is for Scotland because it's Star Trek being twats.
Oh, okay.
And you've got this to look forward to because you're currently going through Next Gen. Season 7, I believe. There is an episode, one of the worst episodes of Star Trek. It's a Dr. Beverly Crusher episode.
Oh, is this where she meets the Scottish bloke?
She doesn't meet a Scottish bloke.
It's a ghost or something.
No. Her grandmother, who lives on planet Scotland.
Right.
It's not called Planet Scotland, but it's Planet Scotland. Like, it's old Scottish Gothic architecture.
They're all like Braveheart.
Yeah, they play bagpipes, they wear kilts, and they all talk with Scottish accents. Some of them are very obviously not Scottish.
Oh, like when they had the Irish characters and none of them were Irish.
Pretty much. So we've got a lot of Scottish people, and her grandmother's ex-lover, who is a good-looking sort of mid to late 30s young man, comes in and starts having sex with her, and it turns out that he's an alien ghost, Scottish alien ghost, trapped in a candle.
Excellent.
And he comes back to give her sex, and in replacement, she loses all desire to do anything but live there and have sex with him. And he lives. Basically, his energy is fed by having sex with her. And
we don't kink shame here, folks.
No, it was
if you want to be a weird sex ghost that lives in a candle, that's your business.
Yep, and there is a shot where she is sitting on a couch on a sofa chair, and she is basically the direction is you are sitting there being pleasured by a man who is not in the scene.
Right.
As Captain Picard walks in and finds you basically
ghost orgasm.
Yes. By yourself.
I was going to make a joke.
You're like, what the fuck? And the thing is as well, the episode was directed by Patrick Stewart.
Oh.
Now, to be fair,
my God, that fits so well with the... and then I walk in, and
then all of their
clothes fall off. Now, she's scrabbling to get them, but I've already seen everything.
The thing is... So he asked, during the later seasons of Next Gen, the Star Trek crew, and by that I mean the crew of the show, not the crew of the ship, they started this thing which was kind of cool, where the actors, if they wanted to, could ask to direct episodes.
Lots of shows do that. You'll notice in Friends, towards the end, David Schwimmer directs a lot of them.
Yeah.
In X-Files, both Gillian Anderson and David Duchovny had a shot at directing as
nice. Well. The thing is they didn't get to pick the episodes. It would just be like, right, you're going to be doing, and to be fair, I don't believe Patrick Stewart was meant to do that episode. No. It was meant to be another one, but they had to switch it around in the schedule for some odd reason.
That is how direct. So I listen to the Mick Garris podcast owner.
Yeah.
And he's done a lot of directing for hire on TV.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't know why, I just didn't know it works that way. When you're a director for hire on TV, you don't get given your script until you turn up.
Yeah.
You agree to a date. You don't agree to an episode.
Yep, that's right.
You agree to, right, you're directing this block, and we don't know what episodes will be in that block yet.
Yeah.
But when you get here, there'll be 2 episodes or 3 episodes.
And
you get the scripts like a week before, apparently, if you're lucky.
Yeah. So yeah, he had to come up with like a directorial idea for an episode that was garbage in concept and has not aged well.
No.
In any, certainly with how Scottish people don't like being taken the piss out of, and now they don't take the piss out of Scots, but it kind of feels like they're taking the piss out of Scots when you've got loads of Americans sitting going, ho, I do, and you're like, no.
I was going to make a joke when you said you see her on the couch. I was going to make a joke, but I knew you wouldn't get it because you've not seen it. There's a really good episode of Always Sunny in Philadelphia where they go onto a film set.
Right.
And because Dee has got a part as an extra.
Right.
But she doesn't realise she's only an extra. She thinks she's got lines, and she keeps trying to get them to add lines in. Frank thinks he's an agent, and basically the others are trying to pitch a movie. And they pitch this movie that's a crime film with Dolph Lundgren in it as a scientist who
that's funny because he is a scientist.
Yeah, as a scientist who, in a lab accidentally heightens his sense of smell to the point where he can smell crime. And anyway, they tell Dennis the idea, and obviously Dennis is the sex-obsessed one, and there's this bit where he's laying out what the film should be, and he goes, your film sounds terrible. This is what it's going to be. We cast Dolph Lundgren as your crime-smelling scientist, and a hot, buxom lab assistant who will be the main love interest. Her character name means nothing as long as she's busty or something like that. And then he goes, and here's how the plot of the film goes. He's in the lab, he's working, he does the experiment, the lady comes in, he decides to have sex, and we get full penetration. He's like, we show full penetration. Then he goes out, he fights crime, back to the lab, full penetration. Goes out, fights crime, back to the lab, full penetration. And he says full penetration like 6 times. And then he goes, and this just continues for about 90 or so minutes until the film just sort of ends. And he thinks that's a brilliant movie. Anyway. So yeah, I'm not gonna lie, even now, I couldn't believe it, but I was sitting here grinning like a fucking maniac when all the doctors turned up. I don't watch reaction videos a lot because I think they're stupid, but one of the only reaction videos I've ever watched is someone did a compilation of that moment where all the doctors turn up and it leads up to Capaldi, and it's all these different fans, and yet, you know, I'm sure some people we know, would look at them and be like, what a bunch of fucking nerds. But honestly, and to be fair, they are nerds. These are people who are sitting watching Doctor Who in Doctor Who cosplay, a lot of them. Right. They've all got like bow ties and feathers on and stuff. But do you know what? They love the show. And I can only hope and pray that I am fortunate enough at some point in my career to make something that has that level of an emotional impact on people.
Yeah.
Because these people, men and women, are crying their eyes out, cheering, clapping. Yeah, they're all in like groups, a lot of them. Like they've had their friends round to come watch it. I just don't see how something that gives you that reaction can be bad. It was the same when I saw Avengers Endgame in the cinema, to be fair.
Yeah.
Like, isn't that what we dream of as filmmakers? To touch somebody that much? And I don't mean in a sexual way.
I was going to say Harvey Weinstein. I think beat you to it.
Yes. But do you know what I mean? Like, you want to make someone cry or feel joy.
Yeah. You want to affect
something.
someone.
Yeah.
No, I get that.
So I love it. I love that moment. I think fair play to Moffat. I'm not being pessimistic here, I don't think RTD is going to top it with the 60th, because I don't think there's any other Doctors in the 60th. I think it's just Tennant. Yeah. I know it could just be them doing the Spider-Man thing, but I know Smith and Capaldi have both denied that they're coming back.
Right.
Eccleston definitely won't, obviously.
If he didn't come back for the 50th.
And RTD, in his first era, didn't have any interest in bringing back classic people. He wanted his show to be his show.
Yeah.
And given that Disney now technically own Doctor Who, I think they'll want to cut ties with the past. So I think we're just going to get
They might bring in the Avengers.
Don't even. Do you know what? That's probably the only way it could revive my interest in the MCU at this point.
Yeah.
Given that the current main villain they're building to is a time traveler, it would be pretty cool. Just fucking Kang the Conqueror's wrecking shit, and the Avengers like, we can't stop him.
That's how they're going to introduce him into the MCU.
Yeah, and they just
he's going to walk out. Yeah. He's just going to come out with the sonic screwdriver.
Yeah.
And
defeat
be like,
Kang the Conqueror.
Yeah. See you, Kang.
I don't care. As long as they stick to Doctor Who and he doesn't, start getting... Because the point is he doesn't solve his problems with violence.
Yeah, the MCU will ruin that. Base.
Oh, I know. To be fair, I'll give them this. We're going to end this episode now, but I will give them this. The first Doctor Strange film, he doesn't solve his problems with violence.
Who?
Doctor Strange. It's got a very...
you didn't say
I got it. It's got a very Doctor Who type ending where basically the main villain in Doctor Strange 1 is a being called Dormammu, who is a, unfeasible ancient god from the dawn of the universe who lives in another dimension. And I can't remember what that dimension's called. I think it's just called the Dark Dimension, actually. I think it's not very imaginative. And basically...
his mum's basement.
He wants to invade... Basically, his dimension, what it does is it continuously grows and swallows other dimensions, and now he wants to come to Earth and swallow our dimension. And the way Doctor Strange obviously cannot beat him in a fight, because he's a literal god. So the way Doctor Strange beats him is he flies into the Dark Dimension with the Time Stone, the Infinity Stone, and he goes, it's a bit of a meme. He goes, Dormammu, I've come to bargain, and Dormammu squishes him. And then he loops back. Dormammu, I've come to bargain. And it repeats for hundreds and hundreds of years. Because the Dark Dimension has no time.
Right.
And Doctor Strange has now introduced time to it. And Dormammu don't like that. He's like, what is this? I hate this. And he agrees to leave Earth alone. So he outwits him, basically.
Right.
Which I like. It was so nice to have a superhero film where for once the solution isn't how hard can I punch the villain. But anyway, so I don't have anything more to say, really, without going off onto all sorts of tangents.
No.
I think they did the best with what... Obviously, this isn't technically a film, and we won't make a habit of reviewing TV shows on here. It is Second Take Cinema. This is purely me indulging myself because, hey, how often do shows make a 60th anniversary? And the way my health is, I won't be around for the 70th one. So...
It's the 75th.
75th. Oh, there's a load of memes going around, of like David Tennant in a load of old man makeup, because there's an episode where the Doctor gets aged really far, and they made him up as like a really shriveled old goblin man. And there's a load of memes now where it's him in that outfit, and it goes, the year is 20 whatever. The BBC are wheeling out David Tennant for Doctor Who's 100th anniversary. Because he's the one they just keep bringing back. There was no doubt in anyone's mind, like as soon as they said 60th, people like David Tennant.
Yeah.
That's the one you bring back.
Because he's the most popular one.
Yeah, which is annoying for me because I like him, but I much prefer Capaldi.
Yeah.
And Eccleston. And I think even Smith, actually. I think Tennant might be my second least favourite. No, not Whittaker. Whittaker's terrible. No offence to Jodie Whittaker. It's not her.
Got the ankle hanger and dungarees.
It's not her fault. It's the scripts that she had. They were
and
awful.
The costume.
And the costume. The costume is dire.
Worst costume.
What's worse, that costume or the Sixth Doctor's multicoloured abomination?
That one. I can't stand ankle swinging dungarees.
Yeah, to be fair, at least his ankles are covered.
Yeah. Yeah. I cannot abide ankle swinging dungarees.
Yeah, I get you.
Like, I would wear the multicoloured jacket first.
Anyway, any last words on your first Doctor Who viewing experience in a long time?
No, it was enjoyable. It worked. It was a bit rushed. It's not perfect. And there was a couple of elements.
It is the BBC we're talking about.
Yeah, I know, yeah. And there was a couple of things that they really should have introduced a bit better. But overall, the main part of it, the emotional payoff, does work. And for me, that makes it worth watching.
Yeah.
If the emotional payoff didn't work, then this would be shit canned in the garbage. But no, it does work. It works perfectly well.
Wunderbar. Well, thank you very much for joining us. It's obviously, by the time you listen to this, it'll be nearly the end of November, so we'll soon be transitioning into our Christmas episodes. And we've got some real doozies planned for you for Christmas. No, I was trying to think in my head. We've got some real doozies planned for you for Christmas, some real classics, and some that I think might be a bit more left field for people. One in particular that's not really a Christmas film, but I watch it every year near Christmas, so we've done it. No, Serendipity. Your favourite film, Rory?
Yeah, let's not.
Oh no, let's leave that as a surprise for him.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to Second Take Cinema, and we will catch you next time.
Bye-bye.